The cold stone floor was her constant companion. For 5 years, it had been the unyielding reality beneath her bare feet, a stark contrast to the threadbare rug and the solitary, hard-backed chair that constituted the rest of her world. The cottage was a cage, gilded with the illusion of safety, but a prison all the same, nestled within the impenetrable walls of the Alpha King's own citadel. Tonight marked the anniversary. 5 years. 1,826 nights of listening to the steady, rhythmic breathing of the beast who slept on the other side of her door. Nessa traced the rim of her chipped ceramic mug, the lukewarm water inside doing little to chase away the perpetual chill that had settled deep in her bones. She didn't have to see him to know he was there. She felt his presence like a change in atmospheric pressure, a low hum of power that vibrated through the very foundations of her small prison. Alpha King Thane, the ruler of all shifter kind, the most powerful wolf on the continent, had made the cold threshold of her cottage his personal bedchamber. He never knocked. He never spoke to her through the thick oak. He simply existed, a silent, formidable sentinel. She had been brought here in the dead of night, a terrified, half-starved girl of 17, snatched from the burning remains of the orphanage she'd called home. His beta, a grim-faced man named Garrett, had thrown her over his shoulder like a sack of grain and deposited her here with a single, chilling instruction: stay. The king commands it. And she had stayed. What choice did she have? Outside this cottage lay a world that had tried to kill her. Inside it lay a different kind of death, a slow, quiet erosion of self. Her only protest, her single act of defiance in 5 years, was the door. She had locked it that first night, her hands trembling as she shot the heavy iron bolt into place. He had never tried to open it, and so began their silent, maddening stalemate. He guarded her from the world, and she guarded herself from him. Who was he? Why had he chosen her? The questions had festered in the silence, turning from fearful whispers in her mind to a dull, throbbing ache of unanswered longing. She knew nothing of him but the sound of his breathing, the occasional low growl in his sleep that would make the hairs on her arms stand on end, and the suffocating weight of his sheer, raw power. A sudden, splintering crash shattered the night's oppressive quiet. Nessa dropped her mug, the ceramic exploding against the stone. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird beating its wings against a cage. It wasn't a sound from outside the citadel walls. It was here, close. Another crash, this time against the side of her own cottage. The small window, reinforced with iron bars, shuddered in its frame. Panic, cold and visceral, seized her. They had found her. The ones from the fire, the men with eyes that glowed with a feral, unnatural light. She scrambled back, pressing herself into the corner of the room, her gaze locked on the shuddering door. The heavy bolt was her only shield. A guttural snarl ripped through the air, but it wasn't from outside. It was from him. From the other side of the door. A sound of pure, unrestrained fury, a predator's rage unleashed. It was deeper and more terrifying than any sound she had ever heard. It was followed by the sickening crunch of bone and a strangled scream that was abruptly cut off. More shouting erupted, panicked and sharp. The clash of steel on steel rang out, punctuated by those same horrifying, wet, tearing sounds. The fight was a maelstrom of violence just feet from where she cowered. She could smell it. The coppery, metallic scent of blood, sharp and overwhelming. Her door, the one solid thing in her life, groaned as something heavy slammed against it. Then again, not an attack, a body, a body being thrown against her door. A voice, laced with a snarl, cut through the chaos. "The hearthlight is in there! Get the door!" Hearthlight? The word meant nothing to her, but the desperate greed in the man's tone terrified her more than the violence. The heavy bolt on her door began to rattle, then bend, the iron groaning under a brutal, focused assault. They were coming through. The barrier she had maintained for 5 years was about to break. A new sound joined the symphony of death, a low, continuous growl that vibrated through her teeth, coming directly from her threshold. It was Thane. His rage had coalesced into something tangible, a promise of absolute annihilation. The assault on her lock stopped. A choked gasp, then a wet, gurgling sound. Silence. A profound, ringing silence descended. Nessa held her breath, listening. The only sound was ragged, heavy breathing. His breathing. It was labored, harsh, hurt. Was he hurt? The thought shot through her, unbidden and sharp with a bizarre pang of concern. After all this time, after all her resentment, the idea of him being wounded sent a spike of fear through her. The silence stretched. 1 second. 2. 10. Was it a trick? Were they waiting for her to emerge? But the sheer, predatory stillness outside felt different. The threat was gone, annihilated. All that remained was him. Her hand trembled as she reached for the bolt. It was bent, twisted, but it still held. For 5 years, this lock had been her shield, her defiance, her identity. Opening it felt like a surrender. But leaving him out there, possibly injured, felt wrong. A betrayal of the vigil he had kept for reasons she couldn't fathom. Her fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the twisted metal. It wouldn't budge. She threw her shoulder against it, grunting with effort. The bolt shrieked in protest but slid back, inch by agonizing inch. With a final shuddering click, the lock disengaged. The door was unlatched for the first time in 5 years. Slowly, her heart a deafening drum in her ears, she pulled the heavy oak inward. The night air, thick with the stench of blood, rushed in to meet her. The scene on her small porch was one of utter carnage. 3 figures in dark leather lay twisted on the flagstones, their bodies broken, their throats torn out with savage precision. And standing over them, a towering silhouette against the pale moonlight, was the Alpha King. Thane was a monument carved from rage and shadow. He was even larger than she had imagined, broader in the shoulder, his presence so immense it seemed to consume all the air around him. His dark hair was matted with blood. Not his own, she realized, as her eyes scanned his form. He was untouched, save for a long, shallow cut along his forearm that was already sealing itself shut, the skin knitting back together before her very eyes. His chest rose and fell in deep, ragged breaths, his hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles were white, and his eyes. She had wondered for 5 years what his eyes would look like. Now, they were locked on her, and they were the color of molten gold, burning with a feral, possessive fire that seemed to strip her bare. It wasn't just a look. It was a claim, a brand, a physical force that struck her deep in her soul, a primal part of her, a part she never knew existed, recognized that fire. It answered it. He took a single, deliberate step toward her, crossing the threshold of her cottage without hesitation. He was inside. After all this time, he was inside her space, and the sheer scale of him made her tiny room shrink to nothing. The air crackled, charged with a power that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Nessa, he breathed, and her name on his lips was not a question, but a prayer, a declaration, a word he had been holding back for an eternity. His voice was a low rumble, like stones grinding together deep within the earth. She flinched back, pressing herself against the wall. Words failed her. Fear and 100 other unnameable emotions warred within her. His molten eyes softened, the feral blaze banking to a low, burning ember. He saw her fear, and a flicker of something that looked like profound pain crossed his features. He stopped, holding up his hands as if to show he meant no harm, a gesture that seemed absurd given the massacre at his feet. "They will not touch you," he growled, his gaze flicking back to the bodies with utter contempt before returning to her. "No one will ever touch you." "Who? Who are you?" she finally whispered, the question feeling foolish and small. She knew who he was. She wanted to know why. A muscle feathered in his jaw. "I am Thane. And you?" He took another slow step, his gaze so intense it was a physical touch. "You are my mate." The words hit her like a physical blow. Mate. The sacred, unbreakable bond of their kind. It was the stuff of legends, of whispered stories she'd overheard in the orphanage. A bond of destiny, of two souls forged into one. It couldn't be. Her? A scrawny, forgotten orphan mated to the Alpha King? It was impossible. A cruel joke. "No," she said, shaking her head, the denial automatic. You're wrong. "My wolf has known you since the moment Garrett carried you through the gates," he stated, his voice raw with an emotion she couldn't decipher. It was deeper than longing, older than obsession. It was certainty. "Every instinct I possess screams your name. It has been screaming your name for 5 years, right outside this door." He gestured to the bloody scene. "This is why I have been here. Valerius wants you. He and his dogs have been sniffing at the edges of my territory for years, searching for what they lost when your parents hid you away." "My parents?" Nessa's mind reeled. "My parents are dead. They died in a rogue attack when I was a baby." "They were murdered," Thane corrected, his voice dropping, taking on a hard, dangerous edge. "Murdered by the predecessors of these curs. They were protecting you, because you are the last Hearthlight." Hearthlight. That word again. "What is that? What does that mean?" she demanded, a spark of her old defiance flaring through the fear. Before he could answer, his beta, Garrett, appeared at the broken edge of the porch, his face grim. He took in the scene, the bodies, the open door, his alpha standing inside with Nessa, and his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Alpha," Garrett said, his voice a low rumble. "The citadel is secure. Valerius's men were a small surgical team, but he will know they failed. This was a test." Thane didn't take his eyes off Nessa. "He has made his move. He will not stop." He looked back at Garrett, his authority absolute. "Have the royal wing cleared. She is not safe here anymore." "No!" Nessa protested, the word flying out of her before she could stop it. This cottage was her prison, yes, but it was her prison. The thought of being moved, of being taken deeper into the heart of his power, was suffocating. "I'm not going anywhere." Thane turned his full attention back to her. The burning gold of his eyes held no room for argument. The air thickened, pressing in on her, heavy with his will. It was an alpha command, unspoken but potent, demanding submission. Her every instinct screamed at her to obey, to drop to her knees, but another, fiercer instinct, the one that had kept her sane for 5 years, fought back. "You will be safe," he said, his voice softer now, but no less resolute. "I have waited 5 years to see you, Nessa. I will not lose you the night you finally open your door." He reached out, his hand moving slowly, giving her time to retreat. He didn't touch her skin. Instead, his fingers brushed against the simple, woven bracelet she'd made from stray threads years ago. A jolt, like lightning, shot up her arm. A searing heat bloomed in her chest, a direct response to his touch. She gasped, stumbling back. He pulled his hand back as if burned, his own expression one of stunned wonder. The raw power of the connection, the first physical contact after so long, had shaken even him. "The bond," he rasped, his eyes wide with a mixture of pain and reverence. "It's stronger than I ever imagined." Nessa clutched her arm, her entire body trembling with the aftershock. It was real. That feeling, that visceral pull. It was real. Her denial was a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of truth that was crashing down around her. She was his mate, and she was something called a hearthlight. And her life, the small, quiet, miserable life she had known, was over. Thane moved with a predator's grace, closing the small distance between them. He didn't touch her again. Instead, he knelt. The Alpha King, ruler of all shifters, knelt on the dirty stone floor of her prison, his head bowed, bringing his molten gaze level with hers. The gesture was so unexpected, so contrary to the absolute power he radiated, that it stole the breath from her lungs. "I will not force the claim," he said, his voice thick with a vulnerability that seemed impossible for such a man. "But I will not let you be harmed. Please, Nessa, come with me. Let me protect you." He wasn't commanding her. He was asking, pleading. And in that moment, looking into the burning golden eyes of the Alpha King kneeling at her feet, surrounded by the evidence of his ferocity, she understood that her prison hadn't just been the cottage. It had been her fear. And tonight, the walls had come down. With a shaky, terrified nod, she surrendered. Not to him, but to the undeniable truth that bound them together. The royal wing was an assault on the senses. After 5 years of stone floors and bare walls, the opulence was dizzying. Plush carpets silenced her footsteps. Tapestries depicting epic hunts and ancient kings covered the walls, and the air smelled of beeswax and dried herbs instead of dust and damp. Thane had led her here himself, his presence a constant, scorching heat at her back. He had dismissed the guards with a flick of his hand, leaving them alone in a vast sitting room adjoining his personal chambers. A fire roared in a hearth large enough to stand in, casting flickering shadows across his hard-featured face. He had not touched her again since the jolt in the cottage, but she could feel him, an invisible tether pulling taut between them. It was a constant, low-grade hum beneath her skin, a disquieting awareness that made it impossible to think clearly. She stood awkwardly in the center of the room, feeling small and out of place, a stray sparrow in an eagle's eyrie. "Please sit," Thane said, his voice softer than before. He gestured to a velvet-covered chaise near the fire. He remained standing, keeping a respectful distance, as if he sensed she was a frightened animal that might bolt at any sudden movement. She perched on the edge of the chaise, her hands clenched in her lap. "You said a hearthlight. What is that?" He walked to the hearth, resting one powerful arm on the mantelpiece. The firelight carved his profile in gold and shadow. "It's an old bloodline, a very old and very rare power, thought to be extinct for centuries." He turned his gaze to her, and the intensity was back, but this time it was laced with something that looked like awe. Hearthlights are anchors. Their presence soothes the wolf. It brings clarity, tempers the rage, and amplifies the strength of a pack. For an alpha, especially an alpha king who carries the weight of all packs, a hearthlight mate is not just a blessing. They are salvation. They are the calm at the center of the storm. Nessa stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. Soothe the wolf? She, who had spent her life feeling like a ghost, possessed a power that could calm the most primal forces of their kind. It sounded like a fairy tale. I don't feel anything. I'm not special." "It's dormant," he said simply. "Bound. Probably by your mother when she realized you were being hunted. She gave her life to hide you, to make you appear ordinary. But the power is in your blood. Valerius knows it. His family has been obsessed with finding the hearthlight line for generations. They believe that by forcibly claiming a hearthlight, they can steal that power, control it, and become unstoppable." A cold dread trickled down her spine. Forcibly claim. The words were a vile stain in the opulent room. This was why her parents were dead. This was why she'd been attacked. It wasn't random. It was a hunt. And she was the prize. "Why tell me this now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why leave me in that cottage for 5 years, not knowing anything?" A shadow of profound pain crossed his face. He looked away from her, staring into the flames. "When Garrett found you, you were traumatized, feral with fear. The scent of your bloodline was faint, but my wolf knew. It recognized its other half. But you were so broken. And I..." He clenched his jaw. "The Alpha King's bond is violent, possessive, primal. To force myself on you then would have shattered what was left of your mind. So I gave you space. I put you somewhere safe where I could watch over you, and I waited. I told myself I was waiting for you to heal, for you to be ready." He finally looked back at her, and the raw agony in his golden eyes was gut-wrenching. "But I was a fool. I thought I was protecting you with my distance, but I was only prolonging both our suffering. The incomplete bond. It's like a constant, tearing wound. For you, it might have been a sense of loneliness, of being adrift. For me..." He shook his head, a shudder running through his massive frame. "It's a slow descent into madness. Every night, sleeping on the cold stone outside your door, breathing in your scent, feeling you so close. It has been a special kind of hell." Suddenly, the 5 years of silence were reframed. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't a punishment. It was a sacrifice. A clumsy, misguided, agonizing sacrifice. He had been trying to protect her from himself. A knock at the door startled them both. Garrett entered, followed by an elderly woman with wise, kind eyes and silver hair braided down her back. She carried a tray with a steaming teapot and medical supplies. "This is Elspeth," Thane said, his voice regaining its command. "She is the pack's healer. She knew your mother." Nessa's head snapped up. Elspeth gave her a gentle, sad smile. I did, child. Your mother, Linnea, was my dearest friend. You have her eyes. The old woman's voice was warm and comforting, a balm on Nessa's frayed nerves. Elspeth set the tray down and approached Nessa slowly. The king speaks the truth. Your mother used an old, dangerous ritual to bind your power, to hide your scent from the hunters. It was meant to keep you safe until you were strong enough, until you found your mate. It seems you have. Her knowing eyes flicked between Nessa and Thane. Can the binding be undone? Thane asked, his tone urgent. A binding like that isn't undone, Alpha King. It's broken, usually by the completion of a mate bond, Elspeth explained gently. Her gaze fell on Nessa's arm, where Thane had touched her earlier, or by a first powerful connection. The shock of it can create a crack in the facade. Nessa felt a strange chill, a phantom echo of the electrical jolt from before. The bond was a living thing, and it was already changing her. She felt different, more solid. The gnawing emptiness that had been her constant companion for as long as she could remember had receded slightly, replaced by the thrumming awareness of him. Valerius will not wait for the bond to be completed, Thane stated, his voice grim. He tasted failure tonight. He will escalate. The council meets in 3 days. He will use this attack, my interest in Nessa, to challenge my rule. He will demand to see the girl, Elspeth murmured, pouring a fragrant tea into a cup. He will try to force your hand, to expose her to the other lords. And I will not hide her, Thane declared, his voice ringing with authority. He looked at Nessa, and the promise in his eyes was absolute. You are not a secret to be ashamed of. You are the future of this kingdom. You are my queen. The word was so absurd, so far beyond the scope of anything she had ever imagined for herself, that she almost laughed. Her? A queen? The girl who washed her single dress in a bucket and ate stale bread? But looking at the unshakable conviction in his eyes, she didn't laugh. Because he believed it. And a terrifying, exhilarating part of her wanted to believe it too. The next 3 days were a blur of disorientation and revelation. Elspeth became her shadow, a gentle teacher who explained the complex political landscape of the shifter world, the feuds between the great houses like Thane's House of Silvermoon and Valerius's House of Blackwood. She spoke of prophecies, of the Hearthlight legend, and of the sacred, violent nature of the Alpha's mate bond. She taught Nessa about the physical toll an incomplete bond took, especially on a powerful Alpha. His wolf sees you as part of itself, Elspeth had explained as she dressed Nessa in soft silks for the council meeting. To be so close yet separate is a constant torment. It frays the connection between the man and the beast. If it goes on too long, the wolf can turn feral, consuming the man. King Thane has held out for 5 years. It is a testament to his strength, but even he has a breaking point. Nessa was beginning to understand. The low hum of his presence was now a constant, aching pull. She felt his moods as if they were her own. A wave of frustration when a report from the border was grim. A surge of possessive satisfaction when his eyes landed on her across the dining hall he now insisted she eat in. At night, she slept in a massive bed with silk sheets, but sleep was fitful. She kept waking from dreams of molten gold eyes and the scent of pine and winter, her body aching with a strange, hollow longing. She would feel a phantom chill, a deep-seated cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room, and she somehow knew it was because he was sleeping on a couch in the adjoining chamber, denying himself comfort, still keeping his vigil. The day of the council meeting arrived, gray and foreboding. Nessa stood before a long mirror, clad in a deep blue gown that Elspeth had procured. It was the color of twilight, embroidered with silver thread that shimmered like stars. For the first time, she didn't see a scrawny, frightened orphan. She saw a woman who looked like she might, just maybe, belong beside a king. Thane entered the room behind her. He wore formal black leathers, his silver Alpha King signet the only adornment. He stopped, his eyes drinking her in. The raw appreciation in his gaze sent a flush of heat up her neck. "You are beautiful," he said, his voice a low, reverent rumble. "I'm terrified," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. He came to stand behind her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. They looked right together. The thought was as startling as it was undeniable. The dark, powerful king and the woman who was finally emerging from the shadows. "Stay by my side. Look only at me. Let them see that you are mine," he commanded softly. "Your presence alone will be a statement." The great hall was a cavern of stone and tension. Dozens of lords from the vassal packs were assembled, their powerful shifter energy crackling in the air. 1,000 predatory instincts barely held in check. They all fell silent as Thane entered, Nessa walking a step behind him. A collective gasp went through the hall as their eyes fell on her. Whispers erupted like wildfire. At the head of the great council table sat Lord Valerius. He was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, with black hair and eyes the color of chips of ice. A smirk played on his lips as he saw Nessa. He rose slowly. "Alpha King," Valerius began, his voice smooth and laced with poison. "We are pleased you finally decided to join us, and to bring your pet." His eyes raked over Nessa with insulting familiarity. Thane's hand shot out and gripped Nessa's, his fingers lacing through hers. A jolt, stronger this time, shot between them. It was a shockwave of pure possession, a silent, furious warning. A low growl rumbled in Thane's chest, and the entire hall fell silent again, the lords shrinking back from the sheer force of his displeasure. "You will address her as you would your queen, Valerius," Thane snarled, his voice dangerously low. "Or I will cut out your tongue." Valerius's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. "Queen? She is a nameless waif you have kept locked away for 5 years, an obsession that has made you weak, distracted. Our borders are being tested, our people grow restless, and you spend your nights sleeping on her doorstep like a common hound. Is this the strength of an Alpha King?" The accusation hung in the air. Some of the other lords shifted uncomfortably. Valerius was voicing a doubt many of them had harbored. "My strength," Thane said, his voice dropping to a glacial calm, "is not for you to question." He squeezed Nessa's hand. "This is Nessa of the Hearthlight bloodline, my fated mate. The reason our kingdom will not fall into feral madness, but will instead rise stronger than ever before." The name Hearthlight sent another shockwave through the room. This time it was of awe and disbelief. The legend was real, and she was standing before them. Valerius laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "A convenient fairy tale. You find a pretty stray and invent a lineage to justify your dereliction of duty. I demand proof. Let the girl be examined by the council's mages. Let us see if this power is real." It was a trap. Nessa knew it. To be prodded and tested by strange mages, to be put on display. The thought made her stomach clench with a familiar, cold fear. She felt Thane's rage spike, a bonfire of fury threatening to erupt. She squeezed his hand, a desperate, silent plea. Don't. He looked down at her, his golden eyes blazing. He saw her terror, and the fire in his gaze banked, his fury turning inward. He was fighting his own wolf for her. There will be no examination, Thane stated, his voice flat and final. My word is the only proof this council requires. He turned to face the assembled lords, his presence utterly commanding. Lord Valerius has overstepped. His house has long coveted what is not theirs. This is not a challenge to my fitness. It is a prelude to a coup. Lies, Valerius spat. You are paranoid, lost in your obsession. Am I? Thane's voice was silk and steel. He released Nessa's hand and took a step toward Valerius. Then let us settle this. You have challenged my reign. I accept. Trial by combat. Here. Now. The hall erupted. A formal challenge was binding. Valerius had wanted to win with politics and poison, not face the Alpha King in his full, furious power. The color drained from his face. I did not issue a formal challenge, he stammered. You stood before this council and called your king weak. You insulted his mate. You questioned his authority. In my kingdom, that is a challenge, Thane said, his voice a death knell. Or are you a coward as well as a traitor? Valerius was cornered. To refuse now would be to lose all honor, all support. His icy eyes darted to Nessa, a flicker of murderous rage in them, before settling back on Thane. I accept, he bit out. The world seemed to slow down. Thane was going to fight him. For her honor. The enormity of it, the sheer, violent reality of what was about to happen, made her dizzy. This was her fault. Her existence had brought this storm down upon them all. That night, the fortress was a hive of grim activity. The combat was set for dawn. Thane had sequestered himself with Garrett and his war council. Nessa was left in the royal chambers with Elspeth, the silence stretching her nerves to the breaking point. The bond was a screaming torment now. She could feel Thane's cold, focused rage, his battle readiness, a sharp, metallic taste in the back of her own throat. It was overlaid with a desperate, protective current aimed squarely at her. Hours passed. The moon rose high in the sky. Elspeth eventually left, urging her to get some rest, but sleep was impossible. Nessa paced the room, her silk gown feeling like a costume for a play she never wanted to be in. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every gust of wind sounded like a scream. The door to Thane's adjoining chamber opened. He stood there, stripped of his formal leathers, wearing only simple black trousers. His chest was bare, a landscape of corded muscle and old, faded scars. His eyes found hers across the room, and the force of his gaze was enough to stop her pacing, to root her to the spot. He walked toward her, his movements weary. The weight of the impending battle, of his kingdom, of the last 5 years, seemed to be pressing down on him. He stopped a few feet from her, his expression unreadable. You should not have done that, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Challenged him, for me. I would burn this world to ash for you, Nessa, he said, his voice raw with an emotion so powerful it made her tremble. Do you not understand that yet? He took another step, closing the distance between them, until he was so close she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. He reached out, his hand hovering in the air for a moment, before he gently, hesitantly, cupped her cheek. His thumb stroked her skin, a touch as reverent as it was possessive. This time, the jolt was not a shock, but a deep, resonant hum, a homecoming. "The fear I saw in your eyes in that hall," he murmured, his voice thick with pain. "When he looked at you, when he demanded to put his hands on you, I would have torn him limb from limb right there." He drew a shuddering breath. "This is the madness Elspeth spoke of. The line I walk every second I am near you, but not truly with you." Tears pricked her eyes, not of fear, but of a sudden, overwhelming empathy. She could feel the truth of his words in the desperate thrum of the bond. She saw the exhaustion etched around his eyes, the strain of holding his own immense power in check. "Why?" she whispered. "Why go through all this? For 5 years, sleeping on a cold floor." He let out a rough, humorless laugh. His hand slid from her cheek to the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her gently but firmly. His golden eyes, stripped of all regal authority, were filled with a desperate, naked vulnerability. "Every night I slept on that cold stone, I was closer to you than anyone else in the world. I could hear you breathe. I could feel you dream," he confessed, his voice dropping to a near inaudible rasp. "For 5 years I guarded your door from the outside, but you were the one guarding my soul from within." The confession shattered the last of her defenses. He hadn't just been a guard. He had been a supplicant. Kneeling at her door, not as a king, but as a man whose very soul was tied to the person inside. He had laid his power, his sanity, his entire being at her threshold and simply waited. Impulsively, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his chest. She felt the frantic, heavy beat of his heart against her skin. A deep tremor went through him at the contact, a groan of pure, unadulterated relief escaping his lips. His other arm came around her, pulling her flush against him, holding her as if he was afraid she might dissolve into smoke. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling deeply. "Nessa," he breathed, the word a ragged prayer. "Mine." She didn't pull away. She didn't fight. In the circle of his arms, pressed against his heart, the roaring chaos in her mind finally went quiet. The aching hollowness in her chest was filled with a profound, searing warmth. It wasn't just his heat. It was her own power, a tiny flicker of it, answering his proximity, his vulnerability, his claim. For the first time in her life, she felt safe. She felt whole. "Don't die tomorrow," she whispered against his skin. He pulled back just enough to look down at her, a fierce, predatory light returning to his eyes, now tempered with a love so potent it stole her breath. "I have not waited 5 years to die the day after you finally let me in. I am going to end him. And then, you and I are going to finish what started tonight." The promise hung in the air, electric and absolute. It was a vow of victory, of life, and of a future she was finally, terrifyingly, ready to claim. Thane was gone before the sun touched the horizon, leaving a phantom warmth where he had held her. The bond, however, remained, a live wire of anticipation and dread. Nessa was escorted by Garrett to a high balcony overlooking the training grounds, the designated arena for the combat. Elspeth stood beside her, a steady, silent presence. The air was cold, smelling of damp earth and steel. Below, the pack lords formed a grim circle. In the center, Thane and Valerius faced each other. Thane was stripped to the waist, his body a testament to a life of battle. Valerius was leaner but wiry, his movements like a coiled snake. He held a short, wicked-looking blade in each hand. Thane was unarmed. The trial began not with a bang, but with a terrifying silence. They circled each other, a dance of predators. Valerius was fast, darting in to slash with his blades, forcing Thane to evade. It was a test of endurance, Valerius trying to bleed the Alpha King, to wear him down. Thane moved with an unnerving economy of motion, his power held in reserve, his golden eyes tracking every flicker of Valerius's muscles. Nessa's hands were clenched on the stone railing, her knuckles white. She felt every dodge, every near miss, as a jolt in her own body. The bond was a conduit for his focus, his contained rage. She could feel his wolf pacing just beneath his skin, begging to be unleashed. Suddenly, a horn blew from the western watchtower. A single, urgent blast, a warning. Garrett stiffened beside her. "An attack," he growled. "On the western gate." Down in the arena, both Thane and Valerius froze. Thane's head snapped toward the sound, a flicker of distraction crossing his face. And in that split second, Valerius seized his chance. He didn't press his attack on Thane. He pivoted, his face twisting into a triumphant sneer. "Now!" he roared. It was a trap. The attack on the gate was a diversion. From the shadows beneath the stands, a dozen of Valerius's Blackwood guards emerged, armed and moving with deadly purpose. They weren't heading for the arena. They were heading for the balconies. For her. "Protect the king!" Garrett bellowed, drawing his own blade and shoving Nessa behind him. But it was too late. The assassins were already swarming up the stairs, overwhelming the few royal guards posted there. Thane saw it. He saw the trap spring, saw the assassins charging toward her. A sound of pure, inhuman rage was ripped from his throat. It was the sound of a soul being torn in two. He abandoned all pretense of a duel and launched himself toward the stands. But Valerius was there, blocking his path, laughing. "You see, Your Majesty," Valerius taunted, his blades flashing. "Your obsession is your weakness. You can't be in two places at once. You can protect your kingdom, or you can protect your pet, not both." Thane didn't answer with words. He answered with violence. His form blurred, shifting, bones breaking and reforming with sickening speed. In a heartbeat, the man was gone, replaced by a wolf. But it was no ordinary wolf. He was a beast of nightmare and legend. His form immense, as large as a horse, with fur the color of storm clouds and eyes of burning gold. The Alpha King in his true form. He let out a howl that shattered the morning quiet, a sound of absolute fury and despair. On the balcony, chaos erupted. Garrett and Elspeth were trying to hold the assassins back, but they were outnumbered. A huge, brutish wolf shoved Garrett aside and lunged for Nessa. She screamed, stumbling backward, her back hitting the cold stone wall. There was nowhere left to run. The wolf's jaws, dripping with saliva, snapped at her face. This was it. This was the end. Fear, stark and absolute, ripped through her. But as the beast's hot breath washed over her, something else rose up to meet it. Not fear. Fury. A deep, primal rage that was not her own, yet came from the deepest part of her. Mine. The word was not a thought. It was a brand on her soul, Thane's claim echoing through the bond. He was fighting for her, trapped by Valerius, and she was about to die. No. The word was her own. A tiny spark of defiance against the overwhelming darkness. She threw her hands up, a useless gesture of self-preservation. But as she did, something broke inside her. The binding her mother had placed, already cracked, now shattered completely. It was not a sound, it was a feeling. A wave of profound, unconditional warmth erupted from her chest. It was not a fire that burned, but a light that soothed. The charging wolf, inches from her throat, stumbled as if it had run into a wall. It whined, its predatory rage momentarily quenched, replaced by a look of utter confusion. The other assassins faltered, their own inner wolves calmed and disoriented by the unexpected wave of power. The hearthlight. It was real. The momentary lull was all Garrett needed. He recovered, ramming his blade into the confused wolf's side. But more were coming. Nessa could feel her newfound power flickering, unstable. It had been a single, instinctual pulse. She didn't know how to control it. Down below, Thane felt it. He felt the surge of her power through the bond, a beacon of light in his roaring darkness. He felt her terror and her nascent strength. It galvanized him. With a deafening roar, he ignored Valerius entirely, lowering his head and charging like a battering ram. He smashed through the stone supports of the arena stands, bringing a section of it crashing down, creating a ramp of rubble. He scrambled up it, his massive paws finding purchase, his eyes locked on the balcony, on her. Valerius, enraged at being ignored, shifted himself. His wolf form was large and black, but a pale imitation of Thane's raw power. He leaped after Thane, sinking his teeth into the Alpha King's hind leg. Thane roared in pain but didn't stop, dragging Valerius with him as he fought his way toward Nessa. He reached the balcony in a shower of splintered stone and wood. He shook his leg, throwing the black wolf of Valerius against the far wall with bone-jarring force, and turned his full cataclysmic fury on the remaining assassins. It was not a fight. It was a slaughter. He moved through them like a force of nature, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. In seconds, it was over. The balcony was slick with blood, the assassins torn to pieces. Thane, his flank bleeding from Valerius's bite, his body trembling with adrenaline and rage, limped toward Nessa. His monstrous form was terrifying, but as his molten gold eyes met hers, all she saw was him, her Thane. He nudged her gently with his massive head, a low whine rumbling in his chest, checking her for injuries. "I'm all right," she whispered, her hand rising to touch his blood-matted fur. A pained grunt from across the balcony drew their attention. Valerius was pulling himself to his feet, his human form restored, his face a mask of hate. In his hand he held a small, ornate crossbow, which he now leveled at Thane's exposed side. "If I can't have her power," Valerius hissed, "then I will take your life." Everything happened at once. Valerius fired. Thane, still in his colossal wolf form, was too large a target to miss at this range. Nessa screamed his name. But as the bolt flew, she didn't just stand there. Acting on pure instinct, she threw herself in front of Thane, her body shielding his. The bolt struck her high in the shoulder. A searing, white-hot pain exploded through her. It wasn't just the physical impact. The bolt was silver, poison to their kind, but it was also coated in something else, something dark and arcane that felt like ice and decay spreading through her veins. Her power, the warm light, sputtered and died, smothered by the dark magic. She collapsed, a choked gasp escaping her lips. Thane's roar of anguish was the sound of the world ending. He saw her fall. He saw the black-fletched bolt in her shoulder. The sight broke the last tether to his sanity. The calm, focused rage vanished, replaced by a feral madness so absolute it was a physical